Today we'll visit the Coralville Dam, the center of Coralville's economy in the early days of that city's history. It's now the site of the Iowa River Power Company restaurant. Here to tell you more is Irving Weber.
We're standing here at one of the historic spots in Iowa City, Coralville, and Johnson County history. It always means a great deal to me because I pretty much grew up on this river back in the teens and in the 20s. I was always canoeing up here, so I got to know a great deal about it. But the thing we want to talk about today is this Coralville Dam. It's really now called the Iowa River Power Company Dam at Coralville. And it was built in 1844. The day that it was completed, New Year's Day, the stockholders and the men who had built the dam had a dinner right here on the grounds, and they served cornbread, cornmeal, and I forget what the meat was. I believe it was turkey. And so they commemorated the opening of the dam here. The dam was built to power a grist mill, and the grist mill was built at the same time that the dam was. So they finished it in 1844, and actually the dam was not concrete when it was built. They had a series of oak cribs, and they filled those with rock. And the rock, of course, held the oak timbers in place, and so the dam was intact, and it stayed that way for many, many years. Later on, it changed slightly, and some concrete was put over the top. The original dam was 10 feet high, and then they later changed it to 13 to give a bigger backlog of water, so they would have more power for the machinery that was here. This was really quite an important bit of economy at this dam. Originally it was a grist mill. Then in 1865, the Close family, 3 brothers, established a paper mill here. They made paper out of straw. Some of the straw came from the milling operation. And it was a big operation. They had 45 employees. They worked 2 shifts, each one 12 hours. They never shut down. It was just a constant operation. Then on Saturday night, they did shut down at midnight and stayed shut down until midnight on Sunday night. Well, then about 10 years later, I believe it was in 1876, something happened. Some terrible explosion took place, and there were 6 people killed. There was a 6,000-pound vat over here in the paper mill, and that 6,000-pound vat, they say, now I'm just quoting the history books, they say that it went so high that it looked just like a bucket, and there was a man on top of it. When the thing came down, they lost the man. They didn't know where he was, and it wasn't until the next day that they found him. He'd gone through a roof of a barn about a block away. So there were 6 people killed there. It was a terrible accident, but the mill started running again later. Then there was a big woolen mill here. They made about 10,000 yards of woolen goods per month. And they hired, I think it was around 15 people, a sizable operation. The oatmeal mill, the Pearl Mill oatmeal mill, also used the water power here. That's what all of them, why these businesses located here, to take advantage of the power that was available from the dam. So they had this oatmeal mill here. Then there was a planing mill, and some sort of a machine shop here. And these things ran along for many years. And then in 1891, the electric company moved out here and took over the entire operation. The electric company had originally been down on Burlington Street, right where the gas where the gas company was. It's now called the Rosebud, and I think before that it was called Grandfather's Tavern. Well, anyhow, that was the gas house, and they originally generated electricity there. But they moved out here in 1891, and it's a standing joke that one of the men who didn't know much about electricity said, well, we'll throw the switch at noon, and by 1 o'clock the electricity will be in Iowa City. Well, anyhow, they generated the electricity from the turbines that this dam operated. At that time, it was sufficient electricity to handle all the necessities of Iowa City. Of course, today it wouldn't even, well, the light company said that in 1968, when they shut it down, that there was just no use of trying to utilize the hydraulic power because it just didn't have didn't generate enough electricity. But anyhow, the light company was here, the power company, for many, many years. And then since 1968, the Iowa River Power Company restaurant has taken over the place, and they have made the motif of a power company tied into a very fine restaurant and bar. It's been going for quite 3 or 4 years now. I believe there was $1.25 million invested to get the thing established. So this is something of the history of the Iowa River Power Company Dam here at Coralville. There are some interesting anecdotes that I hear about it, have heard about it, read about it, and I've even had some old-timers tell me something about it. There was a little boy by the name of Charlie Rink. This was about 75 years ago, and he was playing alongside of the mill race on the far side of the power company restaurant here. In fact, right near where the dam is. And he and two boys, friends, 5 years old, were playing there. And little Charlie either fell in the mill race or his friends bumped him into it. Anyhow, he went in through that mill race, and he was sucked through the tube. He went through so fast that he didn't lose his breath. And at the other end, he came bobbed up, and he grabbed a post, and he hung onto it like somebody climbing a post. Well, came time for supper. Little Charlie didn't come home. And little Charlie seemed to have a faculty of always getting into problems. And so his sister came down to see where Charlie was. Well, his friend said, well, Charlie fell in the river, very innocently. And so the sister went into the mill and said, shut down the mill. Little Charlie has fallen in here. He's someplace. And they dragged the mill race, and they couldn't find little Charlie. And so then they shut down, and one of the men went down a ladder beneath the paper mill, and little Charlie saw him, and he called, help, help. And here he was hanging onto this post. He'd been hanging onto it so long that his hair was dry. So they came over, they cut a hole in the floor, they went down, and they rescued little Charlie. Little Charlie was sort of undaunted by it, and a couple of weeks later, he was playing above the dam here a ways, and somehow he fell in again. And this time, he went over the dam. And of course, nobody saw him, but he didn't come home for supper again. So the first place they looked was down here at the dam. So they came down here, no sign of Charlie. And they went up and down the river bank. And down where Clear Creek flows into the river, that's just about a quarter of a mile below here. You cross that bridge when you come out here. His father saw little Charlie along the bank of the river where Clear Creek comes in. He was completely naked. He had all his clothes hanging on the branches. And his father says, Charlie, what are you doing? And Charlie says, well, I'm drying my clothes so Mama won't spank me for going over the dam. Well, anyhow, little Charlie seemed to live a charmed life, and I read in the newspaper what he had to say, and he was nonchalant and not very concerned about the situation at all. The newspaper said, well, a man like Charlie probably be president of the United States before he quits. But that actually is the last story we ever heard about little Charlie Rink.